I'm in Ojai right now, and I bought a mastering facility. It's one of the first original independent mastering facilities ever. All this stuff is custom built by his brother Sherwood Sachs. All the great records that were made in here with this equipment. Everything is tubes. I mean, from the tape machine throughout the whole chain. This is really history. To be able to be the one considered to purchase this was a real honor.
Of course, Doug had been fighting cancer for several months, and then I got a call from him one day. He had just left the doctors and he was very tearful. The cancer had metastasized to his liver and other organs, and the doctor gave him 2 weeks of lucidity before he would go down for the final count. So I told him I would come right up to see him, which I did, and he called me on the way and said, rather than come to the house, please meet me at the mastering lab. What was so interesting was the lab had been cutting some recuts of albums for Chad, and one of them was a Linda Ronstadt album, and for some reason one of the sides was giving them grief, and of course Doug had not been able to work for a while. I thought that was pretty special because Doug was the, right to the end, the consummate professional.
One of the reasons I really like Doug Sax, this man was totally devoted to music as well as audio quality. He had a research section in North Hollywood where he had a technician who would repair things and wire up things and try things. I went up there once, and I'll tell you how important sonic quality was to Doug. This is an audio cable. These cables are called XLR connectors, and they're used for microphones, studio connections all over the place. Well, I went up there one time, and Doug was actually listening to a test where they used different brands of these cables, and he was actually being able to hear the difference between a certain brand or another brand. And I was there for that test, and I could actually hear the difference between the one brand and the other brand. That says something. I know of no other audio engineer, mastering or mixing or anywhere, that would audition pieces of electronic gear that were in the chain of recording, that he would actually listen to them and judge the quality. And if the quality wasn't good, he didn't use it. Or if he found something better than the one he had, he would change it out. Nobody I know has ever worked that way or done it to the degree that Doug Sax did.
Well, before we moved from Hollywood, we totally redesigned the mastering lab console itself. We kept the electronics, but the control console itself was redesigned. Then we went on to build Lab 2 in the same building. Doug was coming to Ojai on weekends just as a getaway, and he found out he liked it so much he thought he'd build a facility up here. Even though we had built this place, we kept the lathes at the Hollywood division, and in 2000 we retired the lathes. We took them out of service with the intention of never bringing them back again. But then everyone started buying vinyl again. It was discovered by a whole new generation, literally. In 2008, we decided we needed a mastering room. And that's when we brought the lathes out of storage. And with Ed Huckabay's great expertise and design knowledge, this room was built and put together.
Now we're going to skip ahead a couple years. Now it's 1974. My career is doing good. I'm one of the most popular mastering engineers in the city of Nashville. Well, this producer has done a Waylon Jennings album. And he comes by and he says, I'm going to cut it at every place in Nashville that's good, and then I'm going to take it to the West Coast. I'm going to cut it at the mastering lab. Well, one of my competitors, another mastering engineer, called me up and he says, we're having a meeting of all the mastering engineers in Nashville. We're going to plan on keeping that Waylon Jennings album here instead of having it go to someplace on the West Coast. So we all went out to dinner, which was very strange since we were basically competitors. And we knew that this producer would try all four of us, and then he would go to, turns out, Doug Sax at the mastering lab. And I told the boys at the dinner, boys, I don't know, I buy a lot of records, I listen to Doug Sax's work, I don't think we're going to win. Well, what do you know? He tried all four of us in Nashville, went to the West Coast, and Doug won. And I heard secondhand that it wasn't really very close.
I've been mastering with Doug and with the Mastering Lab as far as I can remember. Always his system sounded great, very sweet, very natural. You could bring a tape in, and if you had the goods on it and you didn't need to EQ or limiter or anything like that, Doug's system was able to accurately represent that. And then, he could say, well, I can take it another step from here and not, really change it, but enhance it a little bit. And he would do that. And sometimes we'd go with it, and sometimes we wouldn't. It all depended on the quality of what we're doing. But one of the things that always impressed me about Doug and the lab was his desire to hear the best and to make the best. I mean, down to listening to different wires and different connectors, where he could hear the difference between a Switchcraft connector, XLR, and other kind of connectors, to not have a patch bay so that he wouldn't have any interruption of the circuitry, to take a chance that wouldn't make a good connection. He always wanted the purest signal from point A to point B. And as a consequence, it showed up, and that never stopped, even to the day that he drew his last breath. He was always in a search for the most true and honest reproduction of the sound as it came in.
In the last 2 weeks of Doug, the beginning of that time, I met with him several times at his house, and he was facing the end. And he asked me to get a hold of Chad because Chad had wanted to purchase Sheffield, and he wanted Chad to have it. He had talked to me a lot about Chad. I had never met him at the time, but he had talked to me a lot about Chad, primarily I think because of Chad being so into vinyl. I'm thrilled, as I've gotten to know Chad here recently, that he is very strong on keeping Doug's legacy alive, and is going to do everything he can to uphold it.
Chad has the same passion and love for what he's doing that Doug did.
Chad has taken analog mastering and pressing to a new level. He only gets original master tapes. He uses the finest vinyl. He presses the best records that I've ever heard. And he is going to keep the Mastering Lab's equipment intact, in toto, and have it up and running again in the near future as his commitment to the analog sound.
I'm very excited that Chad has decided to bite the bullet and to buy the legacy of the Mastering Lab, and especially Doug Sax, and to acquire all the equipment and install it in new surrounding, but maintain the history and the quality, and having it directly there with the pressing plant is going to be very exciting, because they'll be able to master, cut, go right into the bath and plate and get test pressings and really have the quality at a level that is really unobtainable anywhere else in the world.
We're going to try our best to get this priceless gear, this one-of-a-kind priceless gear. This is history. We want to preserve this. We want to keep the legacy of the Mastering Lab going. Doug called me and said, hey Chad, this is probably the last time we're going to speak. He says, I'm telling people around here that I would really like you to own Sheffield Labs, and I feel that you're probably the only person that I know that can treat it with the respect that I have for so many years. I just hope you're able to get Sheffield. To have Doug Sax say that to you is very a big compliment, and I'll try to respect his wishes and keep the legacy going in the quality that he started.